So you've got plenty of stories, good ones, bad ones, and different stories that could work for any article, newsletter, your content, because you're trying to build that connection between yourself and the audience. I've spent a lot of time learning how to be a better storyteller, reading books, writing on Medium for a year straight, continuing to write for social and newsletters and everything else. My goal for my pivot to DigiNav was to use my personal stories to bridge the gap between the lesson learned and how it affected real life, or how it came about in real life. And so the idea was to create a story bank of refined stories that I could pull from. But what happened was they were just sitting there. Right. So at first they were scattered across notes and drafts and half-finished documents. You've got the raw stories ready to be used, but the problem is every time you needed a story, you were either scrambling through old files or through notebooks or starting from scratch trying to use your memories to tell the story. And that's why I created the Story Refiner and the Story Bank Notion board, because I kept generating these new stories and I would never use them. I had probably 50 stories in this database, and the output kept getting bigger as I would create new memories and refine these stories, but I wasn't using them. And the stories weren't the problem, it was the workflow. I realized that I was looking at it wrong. Well, I knew I was looking at it wrong. I didn't realize I was looking at it wrong until I tried to automate the process and bring in AI and automation and streamline the number of tools that I used for my personal stories and my story bank. Let me show you the old system, the new one, and how I'm building this out so that you can steal my ideas, or maybe it will help you clarify where there's a missing piece in one of your processes or one of your automations or one of your systems. Okay, let's start with the Story Refiner. So I created the Story Refiner, which is a custom GPT, because my stories, while I was dictating them or typing them out on paper, they didn't seem to flow right, or they weren't cohesive. And so what I needed to do was tell a story and then refine it. So I'll show you that one. Okay, so here's the Story Refiner. You drop your story in and it helps clarify it. So I used Whisperflow to tell this story, and I know that my thoughts are not cohesive. So let's go ahead and run it through and see what it comes up with. So I gave it the answers to the 5 questions that it asked. Sometimes it asks a couple. Sometimes it says, hey, your story is great. And sometimes it just needs like way more clarification. So now you can see that it has responded with a story snapshot and some possible headlines, and then the refined story and angles and calls to action and whatnot. And so what I would do with this is I would pop it into a Notion database, manually copy and paste it. Let me show you that. Okay, so this is the old Story Bank idea board. And what it is it's just like a quick reference of what the story is about, the readiness of it. I have a framework called Shift. What it does is it captures 5 different ideas from one story to be used in the future, and then this is just information from the story and the body of it, and then it goes to a relationship database, which is the angles, and the angles are these 5 pieces, right? So it kind of references it in here. of what, like future angles of what I can do with the story. And that was problem number one. Every time I wanted to use a story, then I would have to hunt and peck here, or I would have to go to the master database of the angles and try and match up. If I had like some angles already thought about but didn't really have a topic for it, I would just kind of put it in more of like an idea bank. So the angles part of it was the actual use of the story, and then also ideas of future use of the story. So the first kink in my system was the fact that, one, I was using the story ideas in the wrong step of the process, and two, I couldn't pick. I was like, I had created the story database to say, pick a story that's relevant to the topic, but I didn't have the topic. I was working backwards. I was picking a story and then trying to figure out a topic for it. So I put all this into Claude, and I had given it the parameters. Like, first of all, I want to automate this process. I don't want it to write for me. I don't want it to change my stories. So that was one. Two was, because I'm automating this, I want to use as little tools as possible. And Claude said to me, like, look, what you're failing to take into account is that the story was not being the first step. It was simply an idea bank. So you would have to go to it and figure out all the other pieces, and that's where you were being stuck. So I created a new Notion space. We worked it out. We talked it out. We built a new workspace, and so now there are 4 different databases in Notion that are simpler and more contained, because I was again trying to put everything in the kitchen sink into one area, and I shouldn't have done that. And then it also said, like, we're going to build processes to automate this, because now you have it broken down into simpler terms instead of all of this manual copy and paste. But the first problem and the biggest problem is step 1, and that's building the flow. That takes too much time, because instead of having the topic and finding the story, you are finding the story and trying to fit in a topic and make everything cohesive within a certain period of time. So a couple things that it said, like, let's refine the story refiner and put it into a Claude project, which made perfect sense. And here's why. Because when you're using a GPT, it is not part of the memory bank. It's kind of like a one and done. Let's do it, and then we're moving on. And so that was the first thing. And then the second thing was, you were trying to refine the tools, so you've got tools in everywhere. If we concentrate on Claude, especially since that was where my article writing, it was like the solid project of my writing. We were already using it. We're going to stick with Notion, and then we're going to use Make for the automation, because we have it was more robust to create what I needed to create to work with Claude and Notion and to automate this. And so what I did, I will show you what I did. Okay, so what I did was I recreated the story refiner. So I made a project in story refiner, and we talked about what context. So I have the context doc library, and I have a workshop for that if you want to learn how to build your own. So what context docs do I need to put in here, and then what instructions do I need to give it, because it took what I had from the GPT and it looked at the instructions and it said, here are the pieces that we need in order to make this work. And so I got the instructions, and then I tested it out by adding a bunch of my old stories in, and that what it did was it gave me the story components piece that I wanted to use to help me to match a story with a topic and use it in the articles. Then the second thing that we did was I had the content writer in there. So we reviewed the instructions of the content writer, which basically it helps me it pulls the story in, it pulls the topic in, it pulls the information in that I want to use for the content of the article, like the steps to make things happen, if there's a video for it, if I want to reference any quotes or stats or even highlight people. And then it helps me to make that into a beautiful cohesive story. And then it said, okay, but here's the next problem is you need the content topics. So we created the content planner. And that's all the further that I got. I'm still automating it, but the bottom line is that sometimes you think you have a process that will work and it doesn't really work. You need to figure out all of the steps cohesively and in the right order to save yourself time and energy. So if you're thinking of using AI or automating parts of your process, look at what happened with me on the Story Refiner. The Story Refiner and the original Notion bank looks good on paper, but what it didn't take into account was that I had a step that needed to happen before I was making it happen. So we needed to flip-flop things, and now I have the Story Refiner that the GPT wasn't for naught. Like, one of my friends was like, so you wasted your time with the GPT. No, because the GPT still works, and if you want to use it try it out to Story Refiner, the link will be in the description. Please feel free to use it. But if you're using it as part of your process, then you may need to do what I do and move it to your own space. And the same with your whatever, wherever you store things. You might store things in a spreadsheet, you might store it in Notion, you might store it in Airtable or somewhere else. So the whole idea is to map out the steps and then ask your AI thinking partner, like, does this make sense, right? Does this make sense? So I've also included a prompt that I use in the article where I outline this whole convoluted mess, so that you can, whether you are trying to create a content creation automation or a customer onboarding or anything else in your business, you can list out the steps and then ask your AI to help you to refine it and find the missing places that just don't work. So that's it in a nutshell. Basically, what I'm trying to do is automate my process in content creation, not to replace me, but to replace the parts where I can use automation to save me time and energy and to really help me strengthen that process overall. And you can do that too. So keep watching, like and subscribe, because as I continue to build this in public, I'm going to keep putting these videos out there so that you can see, like, I've been doing this for a long time and I've been using AI for a few years now and I still don't even have it down pat. So there you go. Like and subscribe. Keep watching. Thanks.